Welcome to another episode of The National Pulse. I'm Raheem Kassam, Editor-in-Chief of thenationalpulse.com. Now with all new servers. Thank those of you who had some trouble getting on the site in the last 24 hours. Just doing a quick server upgrade. Make sure everything goes nice and smoothly in the long run. Because as we grow as a news organization and the traffic grows, obviously, it helps to have a stable website. So I thank all of you who have chipped in at fundrealnews.com to help us out, to join the growing membership of the National Pulse. None of our news and investigations, whether it's CCP, the virus, Fauci, Congressional Democrats. We caught, by the way, I had the exclusive up on the site this morning, AOC hanging out in Garfield Park here in Washington, D.C. this weekend. Remember, she wants you to wear a mask everywhere you go, but she didn't have one on when she went to watch the volleyball this weekend. And of course, we are not mask Nazis here at the National Pulse, but I happen to believe in a certain thing, and that is, if you quote the rules, you can obey them. Welcome to another episode. It is Monday, the 19th of April, the year of our Lord, 2021. And I'm going to do a story today with you guys on the show that you might at first think, I'm not interested in that. But let me tell you, pay close attention to just even the next 5 minutes of this. And if we don't have you gripped with why this matters and why it matters to you and your communities and your local insert sporting team here, then turn off. But just listen a little bit and understand what's going on here. It's fascinating. It's emblematic of everything else that's going on in almost every other industry in the world right now, and that is the story of the European Super League, which is a big story in Europe at the moment, and it should be a big story here too. I'm going to bring in one of my good friends, Benjamin Harris-Quinney. He's the chairman of the oldest conservative think tank in the world, and based out of the United Kingdom. Ben Harris-Quinney, welcome back to the show.
Well, thank you, Ray. Pleasure.
So some people will be asking the question, what does a conservative think tank have to say about football, or soccer, as they call it here in the United States? And why would a predominantly American podcast audience be interested in what a conservative think tank has to say about soccer? But you and I have batted over this issue for years now, actually talking about how everything is set up in that world and what a massive, obviously, market it is, what a huge television market it is, but most importantly, what an important thing, this is for people's local communities all across Europe, and indeed increasingly so in the United States. And also the ramifications it has for other sports. So let's do the news at the top of this. Tell us what's going on first, and then we'll get into why it's important.
Well, completely out of the blue, yesterday, it was announced that 15 of the biggest European football clubs, including 6 of the biggest clubs in the United Kingdom, were going to split off from their existing leagues and form a new European-wide Super League. And they were doing so without any consultation with the fans, without any consultation with anyone involved in football, the managers even of their own clubs. The manager of Manchester United was interviewed yesterday and said, I don't really know anything about this. This is all being done by the people that have come into football over the last few decades, that a lot of them have no interest in the sport of football. They have no interest in the game. They have no interest in the place that their football teams represent. They're just globalist operators, oligarchs. They're only interested in the financial side of it, and as a result, they have no conception of how unpopular what they are doing is going to be. And really, I mean, we can go into this a bit more with why it matters. But really, this isn't about football. It's about globalization.
Yep.
And it's about the destruction of identity.
Yep. And that's the big one, right? Because at the heart of every, most, but you would hope every football club is identity. It may be local identity, it may be regional identity, it may be there may even be national identity and national pride behind some of these bigger teams. But what these guys are now planning, Ben, if I understand it correctly, is effectively the dismantling of the leagues and the competitions as we have known them to create their own superset of hyper elite, what they deem as the elite players and the elite teams who will always qualify for one particular super tournament, which is, and here's the interesting thing, folks, which is bankrolled, debt financed by JP Morgan.
That's right. And it completely defeats the two key principles of football and indeed of sport. The first one being it matters whether you win or lose, right? And the whole reason it's fascinating and it grips people so significantly is that it is a visceral battle, and whether you win or lose is the difference between whether you lift that trophy or whether you get relegated or whether you get promoted. The competition is what makes it what it is. And if you remove the competition and just say, well, every year it's going to be the same 15 teams, it doesn't matter whether they win, lose, do whatever,
right,
they're all going to just automatically be in it. And the second point is that football and all sport is really about the fans. It's not about plutocrats. And if you've got a situation where you are a Manchester United fan, and in the past you were going across town to watch Manchester United play Manchester City, or you were going, a few miles away to watch Manchester United play Leeds. That's something that fans can engage in. If suddenly you've got a situation where, you finish up your job on a Saturday and you've got to fly from Manchester to Turin, to watch your team play, or you've got to fly to Madrid, that's not what football was all about. It's a working class sport for ordinary people who can do ordinary jobs and still afford to go, not be part of the international jet set in order to follow their football teams.
And this goes to a lot of what Americans have experienced here in the United States as it pertains to their national pastimes. And so, obviously you've seen this huge incursion from woke capital into sporting events in the United States. Obviously, there's baseball, there's American football, there is impinging on the golf and the Masters and all of that, and everything that's going on around the Georgia elections, certification process, and all the regulations and new rules that are being brought in to ensure ballot integrity, and all these woke corporations are chiming in. And JP Morgan in this regard is no different. I'm sure they had a black square up, on their Instagram feed, and tweeting hashtag Black Lives Matter and all of this. And of course, just to give a wider context to how Marxism is targeting sports and specifically targeting football, Ben, tell the audience exactly. When you watch a football match, a soccer match in England right now, how much of the screen and the billboards and the corner flags and the things in the stands are consumed by either rainbow flags or Black Lives Matters hashtags.
Well, I think a lot of Americans just won't believe this, because I talk about this a lot on social media and get responses from Americans. They just can't understand how this has been allowed to happen. But after the death of George Floyd, the Premiership, which is our main league, like the NFL, enacted policies that meant that every single player that would ordinarily have their names on the back of their shirt, so you know who they are, you know who's scoring the goals, changed every single name to Black Lives Matter. So you're watching football, you have no idea what was going on. Who scored? Black Lives Matter. No idea what was going on.
But this,
in that regard.
Let me just be clear. This didn't happen for the first game of the season, right?
Yeah, it happened immediately following. I can't remember the
No,
exact.
but I mean, it wasn't just for the first game as some kind of just, it lasted.
Oh, no, it wasn't just the game after George Floyd died.
Right.
This went on for months.
Yeah.
And what has gone on
every match, by the way, right? Every match.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just one team doing this, and it wasn't just, one match a week would do. It's every match, every week for a series of months. The players had on their backs, number 9, Black Lives Matter. Number 2, Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter, pass to Black Lives Matter, and Black Lives Matter scores!
Quite. So it became almost unwatchable. And then you've got a situation where since then there's a minute's silence and a taking of the knee, which is not a British thing, the taking of the knee. That's something that's entirely borrowed from America.
Yeah.
That has now been going on for over a year, every single football match. So I believe that now makes it the biggest and longest period of mourning in British history for anything. World War II, the passing of monarchs, Prince Philip got a minute's silence at the start of the games, but I'm sure in a year's time they won't still be doing a minute's silence for Prince Philip in the way that they were for George Floyd. And then
so George Floyd must have had some serious UK links for all this to be going on, right?
Of course, yeah. And
he must have been part of the royal family.
We know
his name was George.
We know how important a figure he was in British football as well, and everything he achieved in the sport. But so you had all that going on, and they've now thought, well, that wasn't enough. So now what you've got is where the scores are, and the teams are placed in the top corner of the screen. You've now got a sign that is fixed to your screen as part of the broadcast that says Black Lives Matter. You've then got
permanently on screen.
Permanently on the screen. Because no fans are allowed in the stadium, that would be ridiculous. So there are no fans. What you have instead of fans is just these huge banners that are spanning sort of 70,000 seat stadiums that just say Black Lives Matter or the rainbow flag. And when the fans very briefly did get back into the stadiums, of course, they booed all this stuff and then were banned from ever coming to the games again. And to the extent where some fans of Burnley Football Club actually hired a plane with a sign at the back of it saying All Lives Matter, and they were subsequently doxxed and banned from ever attending a Burnley game again. So it seems like football is now, they're not interested in anyone coming to watch it. They're interested in rainbow flags, Black Lives Matter signs, and joining up to this elite international system of jet set that involves no fans, but just involves, selling TV rights to Amazon so people can watch it in China. It has been, I think, one of the biggest thefts from the British people that have occurred in recent years. And we often discuss it, how anything good, anything enjoyable, they find anything that is enjoyed by the average person, the ordinary person that just wants to, go to work, have a beer, watch the football. All of that has now been seized upon. So you can't do any of that stuff now without being absolutely force-fed sheer propaganda.
Tell us about the swipes.
The screenshots. Oh yeah. So as if all that stuff wasn't enough. Now when there's a cut to a different camera, you have to have a little infographic that either tells you how great it is to be gay or indeed trans. I mean, gay's a bit passé now. You've got to go further than that. You've got to be trans now.
Yeah.
Or indeed be black. Or
gay's racist now.
Yeah, exactly. Gay's is the thing of the past. Now it's all about being trans, but also being a trans person of colour, if you can, and trying to tick all the boxes at once.
Can you?
Well, I mean, why not?
Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah.
Why can't you go full trans? And this has all happened. And it's been done off the back of the pandemic because it means they were able to do it without any of those inconvenient fans coming in and telling people what they thought.
Yeah.
So they've been able to do this in a very Orwellian, sort of autocratic top-down way.
Mm.
And it has, in the space of little over a year, completely ruined what I know a lot of Americans aren't a fan of, but what is the most popular sport on earth?
So let me address that for a second, because a lot of Americans I know, and there are a lot of Americans I know that watch soccer and that love it, and the Premier League is becoming a bigger thing here. You start to see it more in bars, but really it's still seen as a sort of metropolitan liberal elite sport in the United States. And it you don't have the sort of ultras or hardcores or working class types of fan bases as you do in the United Kingdom and across Europe. And I want to address that a little bit here, because a lot of the American audience, and probably the majority, I would say, would still say like, oh, soccer's just this kind of, firstly, it's mostly girls that play it at college level here in the US. At least that is my knowledge from sort of watching American television and seeing how soccer is referred to. There's a much greater stress on women's soccer, the women's USA team, than there is the men's USA team, for instance. And it's kind of being shifted that way. They also then look at players like Beckham with his frosted tips, all those years ago, and Ronaldo, and they look at the diving element of it, and all of that, and think, this is not a man's sport. This is a frou-frou sport. But to us, that's not what it was. And I would condemn the simulation and the elitism around it as much as the kind of critical American would. So I just want to sort of bring that home to remind the audience that for ordinary and Ben, the English Game, the Netflix series, I think does a very good job of establishing how it became the working man's game, and maybe we're even coming full circle here with this latest incursion by the elite back into the sport, right? So just speak around those few topics.
Yeah, well, I've been to a lot of American sports, baseball, American football, and the fact is, you can see the Cristiano Ronaldos and the Beckhams and call it a soft sport, but in Britain, certainly in the 80s and 90s, and still to a great extent now.
Oh, Ben, did we lose you? I think we may have lost Ben there. We may have to reconnect with him. I'll try. Because this goes right to the heart of everything that's taking place across a manner of different industries. Ben, do we have you back?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, we lost you there. Yeah, you can see the Ronaldos and the Beckhams and think, yeah, whatever. But go on, take us from there.
Yeah. So the experience of watching most football in Britain, and indeed across a lot of Europe, was a very visceral one. It was dangerous in the 80s and 90s. You go to a football game, you might get into a fight, you might get beaten up, you might get hit by a bottle, and you didn't get any of that in American sport, in my experience. And of course, there's a lot of bad things about that. But what it describes is how visceral, how raw football is, and its roots in Britain is, and its connection to the working classes. This was not a sport that you go to in a pretty hat and eat your cucumber sandwiches. This has always been in Britain a tough sport, and a sport you've got to be tough just to go and watch. Probably tougher to go and watch in the 80s and 90s than to play.
But it's interesting that you mentioned cucumber sandwiches there, because one of the pejoratives about the elite who go to and sit in the in the sky boxes, really much the owners and the owners' friends and those sorts of people, they are critiqued as prawn sandwich munchers, right? The people who just go to have the canapes and the sky boxes, and those are the people who have been taking over the sport, not just in the UK but globally, been taking over the sport, buying up the big clubs. Trying to buy titles by just spending loads of cash, inflating the prices of players, inflating the salaries, therefore inflating what the average punter ends up having to pay to watch the matches. I think I must have 4 or 5 different subscriptions now just to get all the Man United games here in the US. I think there's an NBC Sports one and a Fox Sports one and an ESPN Plus one that I have to have, and there's a bunch of matches that I don't get to see because some of them are only aired on Mexican television stations, and there's this kind of inflationary pressure of greed that's driving all of this. To the point where correct me if I'm wrong, you know more of the detail on this than I do. Are all of these clubs that have signed up to this new European Super League, are they all foreign owned?
Yes, or at least their chief executive is from foreign extraction.
Yeah.
So you've got the Glazers at United, Roman Abramovich, who's Russian. Glazers are American. Yeah. Roman Abramovich is Russian. The Man City owners, I think, are Thai.
Yeah.
At Arsenal, you've got a sort of a board, but with a lot of foreign parties on it. Spurs, actually, I'm not sure about. But yes,
that's Tottenham Hotspur.
Tottenham Hotspur, yeah.
So foreign ownership, that's really been something that's come about in the last 20, 30 years and has totally changed the game. And now it's changing the underlying nature of the game as well, which is, where it's played, when it's played, how it's played, who gets to watch, who gets to compete. So there will be people out there who are thinking, oh, a European Super League? I can watch Real Madrid playing Man United and watch, all these great teams playing each other, AC Milan playing Arsenal and all these teams. I would say great teams, Arsenal, not so great teams as well. Ben's an Arsenal supporter. What's wrong with that? Why, that sounds like a step up.
Well, I've discussed what's wrong with removing competition from sport. So that's a major thing that's wrong with it.
Yep.
But what's also wrong with it is at the moment we already have a Champions League where European teams can play, and that's part of the football season. But the main part of the football season is the domestic league, is playing other teams from your own country. And what you don't get in American sport, I know you have the World Series there, where was it US and Japan and some Canadian teams play, but football is a world sport, and you also have with football the international team tournaments, the national team tournaments, and for very many years now, those teams have been such an important element of nationhood and identity for a lot of citizens, as you well know. When there's a World Cup on, that you for a very short space of time, flying the flag of your country is no longer illegal, and you can happily fly a flag from your house without the council trying to get you to remove it. And it's an opportunity to actually for people to be proud of their country via their football team, and not just about the football aspects of the country, but about everything about their country. And that's been a great thing, and that's something that we're losing with our shamefully the England team taking the knee before games and all these sorts of things that have crept in. And it's been such an important part of our national identity and of the patriotic movement for 50 years and more, I would say. So you when you get a situation where there is advocacy for removing all that and removing the teams from a sense of place and a sense of community, I think you are debasing what not only football is all about, but what sport is all about. And I actually think what the big picture of this is, and I've been speaking to Conservative members of Parliament about this all day and trying to explain to them why I think this is important. And their response with a lot of some of the older school ones that have been in power for a few decades, they're still very much signed up to the neoliberal agenda, and sort of say, well, what's the problem with foreign owners and foreign companies coming in and engaging in all this globalization? They are still operating on that 80s Wall Street precept of greed is good. And I think one of the most important things, ironically, that Donald Trump did, despite being an emblem of the 80s at the time, was to say that actually a country is about more than money, and a life is about more than money, and a community is about more than money. And actually, as Andrew Breitbart said, politics is downstream culture, not economics. People will actually sacrifice a lot of their wealth in order to feel a sense of identity, to feel a sense of national pride. And of course, throughout the history of the United Kingdom and the United States, there are a great many heroes that have sacrificed their lives because they felt they were contributing to something greater. And I think where we've fallen into in a trap on the right more than the left is this notion that profit is king. That's all that matters. And if we can make an extra 100 million a year in this European Super League, that's better than playing the old boring, local teams. Well, no, it isn't, because what you're doing is you're debasing your community, you're debasing your nation, and all of those things are actually far more important than money. And what we've got now, I think, as a big part of the movement on the right, and where we see a lot of pushback from those libertarian neoliberals, is to actually say, no, greed isn't good. Greed is not a Christian principle. Greed is a negative thing. Greed is destructive. And we need to get back to a place where we realize the value of communities, the value of nationhood, the value of identity. And that's what this debate is really about, and that's what is at stake here.
I think if you got past the first 5 minutes and you're still with us, ladies and gentlemen, that's the payoff right there. What Ben said and what Ben talked about is this is going to rip communities apart if it's allowed to happen. So let's get on to whether or not it will be allowed to happen, Ben. I don't know if there are any laws in place specifically that can deal with this. There may be something there that addresses something like this that can be dug up and used. There may be legislation drafted up to deal with this from a political perspective. I mean, I know the Prime Minister has gotten involved with this debate already, and so he should. And I'm grateful for that. It's one of the few things I've been grateful for Boris Johnson doing in recent years. But let's talk about where the Premier League itself stands, where FIFA stands with the World Cup as a result of this, and where the players might end up standing, because it strikes me that if you're an owner and you're greedy and you want JP Morgan's debt financing so you can set up this different league and sell different television rights and all of that, but then at the same time FIFA, the governing body internationally, is saying, well, if you go and do this and set up an entirely new competitor network to us, then we're not going to let your players compete in the World Cup. So how is that going to play with the players?
Well, I think what's happened is, and it's the same with all of the LGBT and BLM propaganda, is that these people that now run these football clubs are so out of touch with the public and with the country that they are operating in, that they probably all agreed that this would be a very popular idea. What has happened? It has been made very clear in the space of 24 hours that this is universally unpopular on the right, on the left, in politics, in football, with the fans, with the players, with the managers. Everyone is saying no to this, and I think they will pull back from it when that becomes obvious. When they pick up a newspaper or actually listen to some of the people that are part and parcel of the game of football.
Stakeholders.
I think they will put the stakeholders. I think they will put their tail between their legs, and they'll sort of say, "Oh, we were only exploring it," or "We didn't," and everyone will start pointing the finger in different directions. But I think what needs to happen, so as I say, I don't think this will happen because I think it's such a crazy idea and it's so unpopular. And it will destroy, and this is the important part for these clubs, it won't only destroy the game of football, it will destroy these clubs.
Yeah.
Because they might get their 300 million next year, but that's the end of them.
Yeah.
They're not going to have any more fans, they're not going to have any more players, and therefore I think what needs to happen now is, whether it happens or not, I think punishments need to be handed down and lessons need to be learned. So what I would do first and foremost is I would make very clear to these teams that if you do this, you will not be allowed to play in the Premier League. You will not be allowed to play in the respective national leagues, La Liga in Spain, Serie A in Italy. You'll not be able to play in the World Cup. You'll not be able to play in the Champions League. And you will therefore be completely isolated from the world of football. And I think if they don't go through with it, they still need to receive punishments in terms of docking of points, in terms of all the threats I've just mentioned,
Yeah.
and in terms
Financial
of fine,
penalty, yeah.
financial penalty. But I think what needs to happen from a political point of view, which is really what I and the Bay Group deal with, is that we need to put legislation through that ensures that this can't happen again and explores the reasons why this has happened, which has really been the taking away of the power of football clubs, which are supposed to be clubs, and a club is a membership organisation. They've taken away the power of the fans, the members, and put it in the hands of a few CEOs. And I think we need legislation to come through to restructure the league so that the league is placed back in the hands of the fans. And there also needs to be an independent regulator, and I think restrictions on foreign ownership of teams. I think we need to go back to British ownership of British teams and the fans being in charge. And actually, if this turns out to be a point where we recognise how far we've fallen, and we realise that we need to do something, maybe there'll be a positive out of it, that we can redress things and turn football back into a sport and away from being just a business for plutocrats and oligarchs.
So this is almost a complete like-for-like analogy with the value of citizenship and the devaluation of citizenship, and the movement of power from the hands of the wider public, the electorate, into the hands of oligarchs, bureaucrats, plutocrats, call them what you will, whether it's the Bill Gateses or the Anthony Fauci's or what have you. I mean, this is a one-to-one comparison to me, Ben.
And it's the same thing, and it is part and parcel of the same thing. I always recall the story of, I went to university in France, in Strasbourg, and a lot of the people I was at university with were very pro-EU and wanted to go on and work for the European Union. A lot of them went on to the feeder training school, the European school in Bruges, and I went to visit them there. And I attended their lectures, and this was back in the sort of early to mid 2000s, and they were all being taught that the nation state is a thing of the past, and we've got to train people to discard their nation and to stop seeing their identity as being on the basis of the nation. And football has been a tool, sadly, in the last 10 years to that end, whereas it was once a great emblem of nationhood. And so it is absolutely wrapped up in citizenship and identity, because what it's saying now is Manchester United has nothing really to do with Manchester. It has nothing to do with Britain. It just has to do with money and the fact they've got a lot of money. And so they fly around the world playing these games with teams from distant corners of the earth, with players that have no connection to Manchester or no connection to Britain. And so really what life and identity is about is just about material goods and material wealth, and it has nothing to do with where you're from or a community or an identity. And I think that is broad brush how Western civilization is being destroyed.
The irony, of course, with that, Ben, is that I'm a Manchester United fan and have nothing in common with Manchester. And I think I've been twice. And the way that I became a Manchester United fan was because of when my father was living in Tanzania, where he was born. Manchester United, Liverpool, Tottenham were the big teams on the world stage, and so they just sort of picked one, right? And as a child, I remember having this conversation with my father, and I was saying to him, "Well, look, I don't really want to support Manchester United," and of course he said, "Well, if you live in my house, you support Manchester United," and I wasn't old enough at 5 years old to get a mortgage and move out. So I ended up supporting Manchester United. But others who had done that, had a similar background to me, their parents came from the same part of the world, East Africa, moved to the UK, and their parents supported Manchester United. Some of them, and I somewhat regret not doing this myself in my sort of early teens, went on to develop a relationship with their more local teams. So Chelsea, for instance, in West London. I think some of them went over to and supported QPR, again West London, and so on and so forth. And so I am sort of the what you don't want as a fan, which is I've got no skin in Manchester. I've got no skin in the community. I've got no skin in, and as you say, the club. Right, I am not a member of that club per se, and I think this is the thing that really makes me, because I have a lived experience with kind of the problem in and of itself. It's what makes me really angry about this, and it's what makes me look to Germany as a good example of how to do it. And I was reading up on this just to make sure I had my facts right this morning, but 51% of the clubs in Germany must be owned by the club, i.e. the fan base, the membership.
Yeah, that's the way to do it. I mean, you're right. You are part of the problem, and I think it's interesting that your support of Manchester United happened to coincide with their most successful period in recent history, where they were dominating the Premier League and doing well in Europe. So
yeah, but in my defence, I will say that I did not abandon them in harder times.
Yeah, well, look, as an Arsenal fan, there's been no glory hunting on my part.
Yeah, and also you're not from North London, so.
Well, Arsenal is the closest team to where I live. They don't.
Well, hold on.
In my younger days, I supported Bishop Stortford Town.
Well, get back to it.
I'm delighted to give a shout out to Bishop Stortford Town on your podcast.
Well, send this to them. Because it's one of the top podcasts in America, and I'm sure Bishop Stortford Town will be keen for the exposure.
Yeah, I'm sure they will. I'm glad to do it. But the point is that the football has been going downhill for a long time in this regard. Yeah. It's been incrementally becoming less and less about the fans, less and less about the community, less and less about the players, and more about money. And you came in at a certain point of that. Well, we both did.
Yeah.
And I think. Had we been around 50 years ago or 100 years ago, we would have just been linked to our local club.
Yeah.
And I think that was probably a better settlement. What we have now is a situation where these clubs are pitching to the Chinese market because that's where they see their money. So they don't care if not a single British person comes to their games. They just want to get this content, these big shiny teams, and broadcast them out to the Far East, where they can get their TV revenue. And from a financial point of view, I'm sure that looks great on a balance sheet, but that's not what a football club is for. It is not a business. It is a community organisation. It is a sport. And we've been falling away from that for decades now. And to an extent, yes, we've been victims and perpetrators on that route. But what I'm saying is maybe this incident can just underline how far we have fallen and remind us to get back to the Bishop Stortford Towns. So I don't understand have rainbow flags in their corners.
If that's the case, I'll join. I'm in.
Bishop Stortford Town's my team. Don't start trying to horn in on my team. Get your own team.
Hold on. I'm going to buy Bishop Stortford Town. Hold on. No, we've got the same problem now.
So it's part of the problem, isn't it? Yeah. Part of the problem. Yeah. No, but I think that's where a lot of football fans are actually, because I've spoken to so many football fans before this happened that say I can't be bothered watching it with the BLM stuff, with the LGBT stuff. And I know a lot of American sport fans are the same, with boycotting the NBA and the NFL because they just don't want the propaganda. They love the sport. They love sport.
Yeah.
And sport is a fantastic thing. It teaches us so many important lessons.
It's true. I just went out and bought my first ever set of golf clubs today. Right. I want sport. I do.
Yeah.
It feels like sport doesn't want us anymore, Ben.
Well, I don't think sport ever wanted us. But
speak for yourself.
But it's anytime you like, boy, I'll give you a run for your money. But
more than welcome to come out on the links when you're visiting this side of the world.
Yeah, well, we'll do it. We'll do a live podcast.
Fine. In fact, you say that, I guarantee you, now that you've said that, I'm going to get messages from people that say, please do a live podcast from the golf course.
Well, Do you not remember the Farage Classic in Arizona, which I won handily?
Yeah, this was a mini golf. This was a mini golf game that Ben and I played. It was hungover at the Biltmore. It was a putting green. Yeah.
Yeah. It was a putting green, but a win's a win.
Win's a win.
You know, so
Congratulations.
Say, any sport you want, anytime, anywhere.
Any sport
I'll compete with you. Any sport you want, anytime, anywhere. I'll compete with you.
Oh, I think a triathlon's in store.
Because it's a beautiful thing, and it's a thing that teaches us a lot about ourselves and about reality, you know, which of course many people have departed from now. And it's a masculine thing as well, which is great for society, and it's great for raising children. And there is so much that is wholesome and important about sport. And all these sports fans throughout the world who love sport but hate what their sports have become. I think the answer to that is get back to the grassroots. Let's get back to the local teams. Let's start setting up teams of our own. If the Manchester Uniteds and the Arsenals of the world are going to disappear in jets over the horizon to Barcelona, let's begin again. But the value of sport will never change. And I think there's a big part of the approach of cultural Marxism is to destroy that value, to destroy that reality, to destroy that importance of strength and resilience and hard work. And that's what we must cling on to with regard to sport. But with regard to society, we must remember the values of nationhood and patriotism, and that greed is not good. As we come out of some of these horrific, destructive incidents that the European Super League is emblematic of now.
Well, Ben, I think you summed it up best. I don't have anything to add.
Right. Well, what you need to add is where we're going to play each other and in what. Because I'm there, boy.
FIFA, Xbox tonight.
Right. We're on for it. And I want to see the results published.
Oh, what's that, Ben? You're breaking up. All right. Thank you, Ben Harris-Quinney. Make sure you check out bowgroup.org. Follow them at bowgroup, and at B_HQ is Ben's handle on social media. He's on all of them. So am I. Make sure you find us at Raheem Kassam, thenationalpulse.com. I know it's a different topic than you might be used to with me, but I don't think it's a different world, you know? It's all part of the same battle that's going on all different sides of the world, in all different industries. The good versus the evil, the globalists versus the nationalists, etc., etc. The fight goes on. Head on over to thenationalpulse.com. Please make sure you share this podcast, leave a review. I'll take 5 stars, please. 4 at minimum. And I really, really am grateful for all of those supporters out there who decide they like our work and they go to fundrealnews.com. And then you can join in. We have a private chat channel. I'm in there every day. You can ask them. And join up and I'll see you in there. And for those already in there, I'll see you in there.